There was a season when people looked at you and assumed something had faded. They saw you become quieter. They saw you step back from places where you once seemed more visible. They noticed that you no longer chased approval, no longer fought every battle, no longer explained yourself to everyone who misunderstood you. From the outside, it looked like you were losing something. It looked like your confidence had weakened. It looked like your influence had diminished. It looked like your light had become less noticeable. Some people even convinced themselves that you were no longer the person you once were. But what they failed to understand is that not every transformation looks impressive while it is happening. Some of the most important changes in life happen beneath the surface where nobody can see them. While others were measuring your visibility, God was developing your depth. While others were focusing on what seemed to be disappearing, heaven was focusing on what was being built. What looked like a loss of aura was actually the birth of purpose. Many people only know how to recognize strength when it is loud. They recognize success when it is celebrated. They recognize confidence when it dominates a room. They recognize value when everyone else is already applauding. But there is another kind of strength that does not demand attention. There is another kind of power that grows in silence. There is another kind of confidence that develops when a person survives storms nobody else knows about. You know exactly what that feels like. You know what it is like to carry burdens that few people ever noticed. You know what it is like to smile while your heart was fighting battles in private. You know what it is like to keep showing up when your energy was exhausted. You know what it is like to continue believing when circumstances gave you every reason to quit. The people around you may have seen fewer words, fewer reactions, fewer attempts to prove yourself. What they did not see were the lessons being written into your character. They did not see the wisdom being formed through disappointment. They did not see the resilience being created through rejection. They did not see the healing taking place behind closed doors. They did not see the conversations with God that happened during lonely nights. They did not see the tears that nobody else noticed. God saw them. God saw every moment when you questioned yourself. God saw every time you wondered if your efforts mattered. God saw every sacrifice that went unnoticed. God saw every act of kindness that received no reward. God saw every disappointment that threatened to convince you that your story was over. And while people were making assumptions about your future, God was still writing chapters that had not yet been revealed. One of the hardest experiences in life is being misunderstood during a season of growth. Growth often looks strange from the outside. When a person begins to mature, they frequently become less interested in impressing people. They become less interested in competition. They become less interested in proving their worth to those who have already decided not to see it. Instead, they begin investing their energy differently. They become more thoughtful, more intentional, more selective, more grounded, more connected to purpose than performance. Unfortunately, some people interpret this change as weakness. They assume you have become less because you no longer behave the same way. They mistake peace for passivity. They mistake wisdom for hesitation. They mistake healing for withdrawal. They mistake humility for insecurity. What they fail to realize is that you are not becoming smaller. You are becoming more aligned with who you were meant to be. There comes a point in life when you stop chasing every opportunity to be noticed because you discover something far more valuable. You discover the importance of becoming. You discover that character lasts longer than applause. You discover that purpose matters more than popularity. You discover that inner peace is worth protecting. You discover that not every door deserves your effort and not every opinion deserves your attention. This realization changes a person. It changes the way they walk through life. It changes how they respond to criticism. It changes how they handle rejection. It changes how they define success. Suddenly, the things that once felt urgent lose their grip. The need to impress begins to fade. The need to compete begins to fade. The need to constantly explain yourself begins to fade. What replaces those things is a quiet confidence that cannot be manufactured. It is the confidence of someone who has survived. It is the confidence of someone who has endured. It is the confidence of someone who knows that their value was never dependent on the approval of others. Perhaps there was a time when criticism hurt more deeply. Perhaps there was a time when rejection felt unbearable. Perhaps there was a time when being overlooked convinced you that something was wrong with you. But the seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. Every challenge taught you something. Every setback revealed something. Every disappointment strengthened something. Not every battle you fought was in vain. Some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. Some of your greatest breakthroughs happened internally before they ever became visible externally. Some of the most important changes in your life occurred when there was no audience, no applause, and no recognition. That is often how purpose develops. Purpose is not built through constant comfort. Purpose is refined through perseverance. Purpose grows through challenges. Purpose becomes clearer through seasons that force you to look deeper than appearances. Many people spend their entire lives trying to preserve an image. They spend years trying to maintain the appearance of success, strength, or importance. Yet purpose asks something different. Purpose asks for authenticity. Purpose asks for surrender. Purpose asks for growth. Sometimes that means letting go of old versions of yourself. Sometimes it means walking away from environments that no longer fit who you are becoming. Sometimes it means enduring periods where others do not understand the transformation taking place. Those periods can feel lonely, they can feel confusing, they can feel unfair. But they are often necessary. A seed buried in the ground looks forgotten before it begins to grow. A foundation disappears beneath the surface before a building rises above it. The preparation stage rarely receives applause, yet it is the stage that makes everything else possible. The same is true for your life. There were moments when you felt hidden, moments when you felt overlooked, moments when you wondered whether anyone recognized your efforts. Those moments were not meaningless. Those moments were not proof that your value had disappeared. Those moments were not evidence that God had forgotten you. They were part of a process that was strengthening you in ways that visibility never could. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. You have survived days that would have broken many people. You have carried responsibilities that exhausted you. You have faced disappointments that challenged your faith. You have endured seasons where answers seemed distant, yet somehow you continued moving forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes with uncertainty. But you continued. That matters. Your endurance matters. Your faith matters. Your kindness matters. Your story matters. The world often celebrates dramatic victories, but there is something sacred about the person who keeps going when nobody is cheering. There is something remarkable about the person who chooses hope despite disappointment. There is something powerful about the individual who continues believing that their life has meaning, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. That power has been growing within you. It may not look the way others expected. It may not fit their definition of success. It may not attract immediate recognition. But it is real, it is deep, it is lasting, and it is connected to something far greater than appearances. There are blessings that arrive through visibility, but there are also blessings that arrive through preparation. There are lessons that can only be learned during quiet seasons. There are strengths that can only be developed through struggle. There are forms of wisdom that only emerge after disappointment. God often uses difficult seasons to create qualities that will serve you for years to come. Looking back, you may realize that some of the experiences you wanted to escape were actually preparing you. The loneliness taught you self-awareness. The rejection taught you resilience. The waiting taught you patience. The uncertainty taught you trust. None of those lessons were easy, but all of them carried value. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. Your worth was never determined by the people who failed to appreciate you. Your value was never reduced by seasons of struggle. Your purpose was never cancelled by temporary setbacks. The difficulties you experienced may have changed you, but they did not destroy you. In many ways, they revealed who you truly are. They revealed a strength that had always existed beneath the surface. They revealed a faith that continued despite challenges. They revealed a resilience that refused to disappear. They revealed a purpose that was quietly growing, while others assumed you were fading. If this message has encouraged your heart and reminded you that your struggles have meaning, subscribe to the channel and continue this journey of faith, healing, and purpose with us. May every message ahead remind you that God has not forgotten you, that your story still matters, and that the strength growing within you is preparing you for beautiful things yet to come. There is a moment that arrives in many lives when the opinions of others begin to lose their power, not because the criticism stops, but because something stronger begins growing inside. It is a quiet shift. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with celebration. It develops gradually through countless experiences that teach a person where their true value comes from. For years, you may have carried the weight of being misunderstood. You may have spent enormous amounts of energy trying to show people who you really were. You may have hoped that if you worked harder, loved deeper, sacrificed more, or remained patient long enough, everyone would eventually recognize your heart. Yet life has a way of revealing a difficult truth. Not everyone will understand your journey. Not everyone will appreciate your intentions. Not everyone will recognize your worth. Some people only understand success when it benefits them. Some people only celebrate growth when it makes sense to them. Some people only acknowledge value after it becomes impossible to ignore. That reality can be painful, especially for someone whose heart has always wanted connection, understanding, and acceptance. But there is another truth that emerges through maturity. Your purpose was never meant to depend on universal approval. Your calling was never meant to be controlled by the opinions of people who only saw fragments of your story. God never designed your future around the limitations of human perception. While others were forming conclusions based on appearances, He was looking at the entirety of your journey. He saw the struggles that happened behind closed doors. He saw the sacrifices nobody applauded. He saw the battles you fought in silence. He saw the courage it took to keep moving forward when your strength felt depleted. He saw the nights when your faith was the only thing keeping you standing. He saw every moment when you wanted to quit, but chose to continue. Those moments mattered. Those moments carried significance far beyond what anyone else could understand. Sometimes people mistake visible confidence for real strength. They assume the strongest person is the loudest person. They assume the most successful person is the most admired person. They assume the most influential person is the one receiving the most attention. Yet life repeatedly demonstrates that the deepest strength often exists where few people are looking. Quiet strength is not weakness. Quiet strength is what allows someone to remain kind after experiencing disappointment. Quiet strength is what allows someone to keep believing after facing rejection. Quiet strength is what allows someone to continue loving even after being hurt. Quiet strength is what allows a person to hold on to hope when circumstances provide very little evidence that things will improve. You possess that kind of strength. It was not developed overnight. It was formed through seasons that stretched you. It was shaped through challenges that demanded more from you than you thought you could give. It was refined through moments when nobody was offering easy solutions. The world may not always notice that kind of growth, but heaven does. God notices every step. God notices every act of perseverance. God notices every decision to remain faithful when bitterness would have been easier. One reason people sometimes believe you are losing something is because they compare your current season to a previous version of you. They remember who you were years ago. They remember your old habits, your old priorities, your old reactions. They expect you to remain the same. When you change, they become confused. When you become more intentional, they wonder what happened. When you become more selective about where you invest your energy, they assume you are withdrawing. When you stop chasing validation, they assume you have lost confidence. What they fail to recognize is that growth naturally changes behavior. A person who has learned difficult lessons will not approach life the same way they once did. A person who has experienced heartbreak will carry greater wisdom into future relationships. A person who has survived disappointment will become more thoughtful about what deserves their attention. Growth creates discernment. Growth creates patience. Growth creates perspective. Those qualities often appear less exciting than the traits people celebrate publicly, but they are infinitely more valuable in the long run. There are individuals who spend decades pursuing an image while neglecting their purpose. There are people who become experts at appearing successful while remaining disconnected from who they truly are. You have been learning something different. You have been learning the importance of alignment. You have been discovering that peace is more valuable than performance. You have been realizing that purpose creates a deeper sense of fulfillment than recognition ever could. That realization changes everything. Suddenly, the opinions that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their grip. The comparisons begin to lose their power. The pressure to prove yourself begins to fade. In its place emerges a stronger foundation. You begin building your life on truth rather than perception. You begin measuring your progress by growth rather than applause. You begin recognizing that your value exists whether or not other people acknowledge it. This does not mean rejection stops hurting. It does not mean disappointment disappears. It does not mean difficult days vanish completely. It simply means those experiences no longer define your identity. You stop allowing temporary circumstances to determine your permanent worth. You begin understanding that your life contains meaning even when certain chapters are painful. Some of the people who doubted you never realized how much strength it took for you to survive what you survived. They never saw the internal battles. They never saw the emotional weight you carried. They never saw the moments when you felt overwhelmed and exhausted. They only saw brief snapshots. They only saw isolated moments. They only saw pieces of a much larger story. Because of that, their conclusions were incomplete. Their judgments were limited. Their assumptions were inaccurate. Yet many people spend years allowing those assumptions to shape how they see themselves. Perhaps you have done that at times. Perhaps there were moments when someone else's opinion became louder than your own understanding of who you are. Perhaps there were seasons when criticism felt more believable than encouragement. Perhaps there were days when you questioned your value because certain people failed to recognize it. If so, know this: their inability to see your worth never reduced your worth. Their misunderstanding never diminished your purpose. Their rejection never cancelled your future. The people who overlooked you were not determining your destiny. They were simply revealing the limitations of their perspective. Your story is bigger than their assumptions. Your future is larger than their expectations. Your purpose extends beyond their understanding. One of the most beautiful aspects of growth is that it often transforms pain into wisdom. The experiences that once wounded you begin teaching you. The seasons that once confused you begin making sense. The challenges that once felt meaningless begin revealing their lessons. You start seeing connections you could not see before. You start recognizing how certain disappointments redirected you toward healthier paths. You start realizing that some closed doors protected you from situations that would not have served your future. You start understanding that not every loss was punishment. Some losses were preparation. Some losses created space for something better. Some losses removed distractions that would have kept you from discovering who you were meant to become. This does not erase the pain, it does not rewrite history, but it does give purpose to experiences that once seemed pointless. The human heart desperately wants meaning. It wants to know that suffering was not wasted. It wants to know that tears were not meaningless. It wants to know that difficult seasons served a purpose. Often with time, that purpose becomes clearer. You begin seeing how resilience was formed. You begin seeing how compassion deepened. You begin seeing how wisdom expanded. You begin seeing how faith matured. Not every battle you fought was in vain. Some battles revealed strengths you never knew existed. Some battles uncovered courage that had been hidden beneath fear. Some battles taught you to trust God more deeply than ever before. Through it all, you were becoming someone stronger, wiser, and more prepared. The version of you that exists today has survived things your younger self never imagined facing. The version of you that exists today carries lessons earned through experience. The version of you that exists today understands things that can only be learned through perseverance. That deserves recognition. That deserves respect. That deserves gratitude. Too often, people focus only on where they still want to go and forget how far they have already come. Take a moment to remember the person you were during your most difficult season. Remember the uncertainty. Remember the exhaustion. Remember the fear. Now look at yourself. You are still here. You are still growing. You are still believing. You are still moving forward. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. God has been present throughout every chapter. Even when answers seemed delayed, He was present. Even when circumstances felt confusing, He was present. Even when loneliness felt overwhelming, He was present. The silence was never abandonment. The waiting was never evidence that you had been forgotten. Sometimes preparation happens in places where progress is difficult to see. Sometimes the most important work occurs beneath the surface. Just because growth was invisible did not mean growth was absent. Just because purpose was developing quietly did not mean purpose was not developing at all. What others interpreted as decline may have actually been preparation. What others interpreted as weakness may have actually been healing. What others interpreted as failure may have actually been transformation. You are not defined by the misunderstandings of others. You are not defined by your hardest season. You are not defined by your worst day. You are defined by something much deeper. You are defined by the strength that carried you through adversity. You are defined by the faith that refused to disappear. You are defined by the courage that kept taking one more step. You are defined by the value God placed within you long before anyone formed an opinion about your life. That value remains. That purpose remains. That hope remains. If these words have helped you see your journey with new eyes and reminded you that your growth still matters, subscribe to the channel and continue walking with a community that believes in faith, healing, perseverance, and purpose. May every message encourage you to keep moving forward with confidence, knowing that your story is still unfolding and that God continues to work within every chapter of your life. The remarkable thing about purpose is that it rarely arrives in the form people expect. Many imagine that purpose will immediately feel exciting, clear, and celebrated. They imagine doors opening effortlessly. They imagine recognition arriving quickly. They imagine confidence appearing without struggle. Yet for many people, especially those who have endured difficult seasons, purpose first reveals itself through transformation. It reveals itself through growth that happens quietly. It reveals itself through healing that takes place one day at a time. It reveals itself through the gradual realization that who you are becoming matters more than who others expected you to be. Looking back over your life, there may be chapters you would never have chosen. There may be seasons you wish had been easier. There may be losses you still carry, disappointments you still remember, and wounds that took far longer to heal than anyone realized. Those experiences were real. The pain was real. The loneliness was real. The exhaustion was real. Yet there is another reality that exists alongside those experiences. You survived them. You endured them. You continued moving forward despite them. That truth deserves more attention than it often receives. In a world that constantly focuses on what is missing, it is easy to overlook what has already been built within you. It is easy to forget the strength you developed. It is easy to overlook the wisdom you gained. It is easy to underestimate the resilience that carried you through seasons that once felt impossible. Sometimes people become so focused on reaching the next destination that they fail to appreciate the person they became along the journey. You have become someone who understands perseverance. You have become someone who understands empathy. You have become someone who understands patience. You have become someone who understands the value of faith during uncertain seasons. Those qualities were not acquired through comfort alone. They were formed through experience. They were strengthened through adversity. They were refined through challenges that required courage long before results became visible. This is one reason why what looked like a loss of aura was actually the gaining of purpose. Aura, as many people define it, depends heavily on perception. It depends on how others see you. It depends on impressions. It depends on attention. Purpose operates differently. Purpose is rooted in identity. Purpose is rooted in growth. Purpose is rooted in alignment with the person God is shaping you to become. One can be admired without purpose. One can be noticed without purpose. One can be celebrated without purpose. But when purpose begins taking root, something deeper develops. A person becomes less dependent on external validation and more connected to internal truth. They become less controlled by shifting opinions and more grounded in lasting values. They become less focused on proving themselves and more focused on living meaningfully. This shift often confuses people. The same individuals who once expected you to seek their approval may not understand why their approval no longer controls your peace. The same people who expected constant explanations may not understand your quiet confidence. The same people who once underestimated you may not understand the strength they now sense within you. That is because purpose changes the way a person carries themselves. It creates a calmness that does not need constant recognition. It creates a stability that does not disappear during challenges. It creates a confidence that remains even when applause is absent. You may not always feel strong. You may still have difficult days. You may still experience moments of doubt, disappointment, and uncertainty. Being strong does not mean never struggling. Being strong means continuing despite the struggle. Being faithful does not mean never questioning. It means continuing to trust, even when every answer has not yet arrived. Being resilient does not mean never feeling tired. It means refusing to let exhaustion become the final chapter of your story. There is a strength within you that kept moving forward even on your darkest days. That strength deserves acknowledgement. So many of your victories happened quietly. They happened when nobody was watching. They happened when there was no audience. They happened when there was no recognition waiting at the finish line. Every time you chose hope over despair, that was a victory. Every time you chose kindness despite disappointment, that was a victory. Every time you got out of bed during a difficult season and continued moving forward, that was a victory. Every time you trusted God with a burden you could not carry alone, that was a victory. Those moments may never appear on a stage. They may never receive public recognition. Yet they reveal the true depth of your character. Character is often built in places where applause never reaches. That is why some of the strongest people are also the quietest. They understand that true growth happens internally, before it becomes visible externally. They understand that meaningful transformation cannot be rushed. They understand that the process matters. You have been living through a process that is shaping something valuable within you. Even now, there may be areas of your life that feel unfinished. There may be prayers that remain unanswered. There may be hopes that are still developing. There may be goals that feel distant. Do not allow what is unfinished to blind you to what has already been accomplished. Look at how much healing has already taken place. Look at how much wisdom has already been gained. Look at how many obstacles have already been overcome. Look at how many lessons have already been learned. Progress is not always measured by arrival. Sometimes progress is measured by endurance. Sometimes progress is measured by growth. Sometimes progress is measured by the fact that you continued believing when giving up would have been easier. God often works through processes that unfold gradually. A tree does not grow overnight. A foundation is not built instantly. A life of purpose develops through countless small moments that seem ordinary at the time. Yet when viewed together, those moments tell a remarkable story. They tell the story of someone who refused to quit. They tell the story of someone who kept learning, kept growing, and kept trusting. They tell the story of someone who continued moving toward the light, even during seasons that felt dark. Your story has value even if it did not unfold the way you expected. In fact, some of the most meaningful stories are the ones that include unexpected turns. The detours teach lessons the straight path never could. The struggles reveal strengths that comfort never would. The challenges uncover faith that ease never requires. Your life is not meaningful because it was perfect. Your life is meaningful because you continued through imperfection. Your life is meaningful because you continued through uncertainty. Your life is meaningful because you continued through seasons that tested every part of you. There are people who will never fully understand your journey, and that is all right. Their understanding is not required for your purpose to exist. Their approval is not required for your value to remain intact. Their recognition is not required for your future to unfold. The one who created you understands your story completely. The one who saw your first breath and every moment since understands every struggle, every sacrifice, every fear, every hope, and every prayer. God saw the tears that nobody else noticed. God saw the moments when you felt forgotten. God saw the days when you questioned whether your efforts mattered. God saw the burden you carried while trying to remain strong for others. Nothing was invisible to him. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was meaningless. Even now, when certain parts of the future remain unclear, you can trust that your journey still holds purpose. You can trust that growth is still happening. You can trust that healing is still unfolding. You can trust that your worth remains unchanged by temporary circumstances. The people who thought you were losing aura were measuring the wrong thing. They were looking for visibility when God was building depth. They were looking for attention when God was developing character. They were looking for outward signs when God was working on inward transformation. What they perceived as decline was often maturity. What they perceived as weakness was often wisdom. What they perceived as less was often preparation for something greater. The beautiful truth is that purpose does not need to announce itself to be real. It quietly shapes decisions. It quietly strengthens faith. It quietly heals wounds. It quietly transforms a life from the inside out. And one day, the growth that happened in private becomes visible through the peace you carry, the wisdom you share, the kindness you extend, and the resilience you embody. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally embraced the person you were becoming all along. If this journey of encouragement has reminded you that your struggles were not wasted and that your purpose is still unfolding, subscribe to the channel and continue walking with others who are learning to grow through faith, healing, and hope. Together, we can keep discovering the strength God has placed within us and the meaning hidden inside every season of life.